Hello, everyone. This is Jonathan Little, and I'm here today with the 19th episode of Weekly Poker Hand. And today I'm going to be discussing a scenario where you should not slow play. So in this hand, we have 90 big blinds. We are in the cutoff with ace 10 of hearts. The small blind is 50, big blind is 100. So we have a lot of chips. A player in middle position raises to 3 big blinds. A player in the hijack seat calls, and we have ace 10 suited in the cutoff. And I actually discussed this similar situation, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, in episode 17, I think it was. Or no, you know what? Maybe it was more like episode 15. I'm sure, hopefully you guys have all watched that episode by now. But anyways, there are merits to calling, there are merits to re-raising, and I could go either way. I don't think either play is significantly better or worse than the other. I definitely think you should mix up your play in this scenario. But I lean towards calling. When I say mix it up, I usually mean mix it up based on what your opponents are likely to do versus your re-raise. So in this hand, we flop it. King, queen, jack, 2 hearts. Seems amazing. Anytime you flop the nuts, you have to be extraordinarily happy. So in this hand, the big blind called as well. He checked, and the initial raiser bet 800 into the 1200 chip pots. So the question now becomes, should I raise or should I call? And I think a lot of players make a humongous mistake in this spot by calling. You're going to find that a lot of amateurs blindly slow play anytime they have the nuts. That's just what they do. Or they blindly fast play it, one of the two. Either they're always raising or they're always calling. But whenever you have the nuts, you have to recognize that all the nuts are not created equally. Some are much more susceptible than others. And also, you have to think about your opponent's range. Like, is it likely that the player who continuation bet has something on king, queen, jack? And I think the answer is absolutely. He could easily have ace king or king queen or pocket queens or flush draw or anything like that. So this is a scenario where it's so easy for my opponent to have a good hand that I want to go ahead and raise and re-raise and get money into this pot while I have the nuts and he could easily have a very good hand as well. If instead, maybe I had something like pocket twos, or let's say I had pocket aces on ace, ace, 4, and my opponent bet into me, that's the spot where I would not want to raise, because if I raise, my opponent can't have anything. So you always have to think about, what do I have? Is it vulnerable to turn cards? And can my opponent have anything? And in this spot, my hand's very vulnerable to turn cards. Notice any ace is bad, any 10 is bad. They're not bad because I lose. They're bad because we're now chopping or it kills my action. A 9 is not particularly good. A king, queen, or jack could actually beat me. And any club is bad. So we actually have a lot of cards in the deck that are not good for me. And anytime that's the case, you probably want to be raising when you have the nuts. So he bets 800. So the question then becomes, how much should I raise? And I think a good amount here is maybe something like 18 or 1900. I don't think you need to make it huge. And I also don't think you should raise the minimum. One of the worst things you can do whenever you have a vulnerable hand is raise the minimum, because you're giving your opponents excellent odds to continue. And also, you're going to find that most players think that min raises look way stronger than maybe making it 18 or 1900 in this scenario. Even though the bets are similar, there's something about raising the minimum that screams strength. It's like saying, look, I don't care if you continue because my hand is so incredibly good. So I want to raise, maybe even 2200 would be better. Just go ahead and apply pressure. And I did make it 2100. So I'm okay with that. I definitely want to make it clear that you want to make it look to your opponent like you are trying to get him to fold. You don't want to make it look to him like you're trying to rope him in. And whenever you make it small, most players are going to think that you are trying to rope them in. So at this point, I'm obviously rooting for my opponent to re-raise. The one thing you have to be careful with when you raise the flop is you don't want to make it look like you're never folding. Because if my opponent knows I'm never folding, that means I must have at least something kind of good or a very good draw. So there's a fine line in this scenario, but I think 2100 is a good amount. Maybe even 2000, maybe 1900, somewhere in there. Just make sure you don't make it 3000 or something. I think 3000 would be by far the worst option. So it gets back to my opponent, and he goes all in. So of course I'm going to call. We have the nuts. Whenever you have the nuts, don't fold. Don't think, oh, you could have a flush draw. I don't want to get outdrawn. Don't think anything like that. And my opponent actually had king, jack of diamonds. So I had to fade a king or a jack, and I did. Notice that the board ran out with an ace of clubs, which would be a terrible card, and of 2 of clubs, which really would be a terrible card. So as the board ran out, I certainly would not have gotten paid off, but by raising the flop, I got my opponent to put it all in because he probably thought I was on a draw. He thought, oh, this guy raised the flop. He can't have a better hand than mine. He must be drawing. And of course, that's not the way you should think about poker, but that is the way a lot of your opponents will think about poker. So this is a beautiful example of where you should not slow play. And like I said at the beginning of this episode, don't get in the habit of blindly slow playing or blindly not slow playing. Always think about what can my opponent have and will my opponent put his stack in on this flop. And on King, Queen, Jack, it is so easy for my opponent to have a good hand. You have to pile the money in and happily get your opponent in when he's drawing nearly dead. And of course, here he had 4 outs, so he's not stone dead or anything. But if you know your opponent has 4 outs, you're happy to get it all in. So if you guys like this hand sharing application, it's called Share My Pair. Definitely check it out at sharemypair.com or in the iPhone or Android app store. You can post hands. You can view a lot of hands that I post. If you notice, all the hands from Weekly Poker Hand are made using this application. So if you get on there, you can actually go through and review this and see what other comments people have made on these hands. So if you want to share your hands with your friends, with other people, just to get comments on your play, definitely check out that site. I think it's an amazing way to learn poker. So check out Share My Pair. If you guys have any questions or comments about this blog, definitely feel free to ask them in my blog at jonathanlittlepoker.com. I'm more than happy to answer them. And I will talk to you guys next time. This has been Jonathan Little for Weekly Poker Hand. Thank you for watching.